Hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a great Tuesday. I am Isaiah Juarez, and for my Canvas Day 1 assignment, I will be covering the forms of protest used during the 1968 East LA walkout or blowout movements and why these forms of protest were so significant. The two forms of protest I will be covering will be community outreach and the way in which the protesters recognized how unlawful arrest by the police could be used as an effective motive. In the documentary Chicanos Taking Back the Schools, Paula Cristamano stated the students informed their class peers and families on the board's negligence in teaching Mexican Americans and how they considered them for college enrollment. Now, as a result of informing community members, the students established the advocacy organization United Mexican American Students, or UMAS. The students wanted to emphasize to their community that their taxpayer privileges were ignored since the board refused to provide impartial high school opportunities and future college opportunities due to the basis of their identity. Where does unlawful arrest factor in? The LAPD during the walkouts indicted participants such as Carlos Munoz and Sal Castro on charges of conspiracy and were proposed life sentences that spanned 60 years in order to threaten the will of the movement. However, the indicted protesters expressed how peacefully advocating for educational policies granted law enforcement a sense of justification to arrest citizens on the basis of going against the school board. The arrests then further motivated Chicanos to realize their efforts were not solely to improve education, but the treatment of Latino Americans as American citizens. An additional form of protest was based on gender, which involved the presence of Chicana protesters. Now, Chicanas and Chicanos both acknowledge the prevalence of gendered stereotypes within the LA high school institutions, mainly the gender ideals of how men and women should act appropriately in society. Recognizing society's attachment to restrictive gender roles allowed the Chicanas to consider more effective acts of protest to better influence the LA community on equitable education for Chicanos, regardless of gender identity or racial identity. Author Dolores Bernal, whose source I will be listing right here, she provides the accounts of one of the blowout participants, Victoria Castro, who is also present in the documentary I mentioned earlier. Castro mentioned how demonstrations were strategized to appeal to the public gendered assumptions. Now, for example, in page 121, Castro states, in quote, "I didn't really look like a chola," which she's referring to tough. If he wanted somebody to be aggressive and very vocal, then that was David's role, who she's referring to the figure David Sanchez. Now, by heeding to societal expectations on dressing and acting appropriately, Chicanas were able to efficiently promote their goals to people who did not have much knowledge on the movement at all. However, though, the circumstances of leadership varied between Chicanas and Chicanos since men were perceived as more qualified for advocating on behalf of the cultural ideals of gender roles in the Chicano community. Now, Bernal in the article also references on page 119, Cristamano, one of the speakers in the documentary, elaborated on the common ideal of the community preferring male leadership. Now, Cristamano explained that media coverage focused on interviews with Chicanos, and protesters decided for a male speaker since some Chicanos were very disinterested in speaking publicly and just wanted to avoid all notoriety of the public.